Hello, and welcome to Kitten Socialization. Do Kittens Need Kindergarten? I'm Krista Keith, Senior Communications Strategist for Fear Free. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping items. I have to think of a new phrase for that. I'm getting tired of that one. Business items. First, we'd like to thank our friends and Fear Free sponsors at Vetiquinol for making this webinar possible. We would not be able to offer it to you tonight without their support, so we are so grateful. And we'd also like to thank all of you for making time for this webinar this evening. We know that especially for those of you on the East Coast, and Dr. Sirois and I are both on the East Coast, so we feel your pain. It's kind of late, but we really welcome you and thank you. Next, yes, the recorded version of this webinar will be available within around 1 week or so at fearfreepets.com/webinars. Dr. Sirois will be taking your questions after her presentation. As your questions arise during the presentation, however, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A interface. Don't be a hoarder. If she does subsequently answer them, I'll just not ask that question at the end, but it really helps us with our flow and with our planning for time if we get the questions as they come to you rather than all at the end. So for veterinarians and technicians who would like to receive RACE CE in jurisdictions that recognize RACE, I will be emailing you right after this presentation with a link to the CE survey. This will go out to everyone who actually attended and who was in here for the majority of the presentation, and it will track that. I can see that information for purposes of CE. Please note that only those of you attending the live webinar are eligible for CE. If you're watching this in the recorded version, unfortunately, CE is not available. If you wish to have please listen carefully to this because I always am deluged with email about it right after every presentation. If you want a CE certificate that you can actually print out, it is in a link in the 5th question of the survey that you have to fill out to get CE. You need to click on the word "here" in that question that is a hyperlink and either go ahead and download the certificate immediately or save that link so that you can go back to it later. Please don't wait to take the survey because it is only open until Monday afternoon Eastern Time at 3. So don't delay because once that window closes, you will not be able to take the survey and get CE for this presentation. If you have any problem, please notify me before the survey closes. Once it closes, I'm not going to be able to help you. And you can reach me at fearfreepets@gmail.com. Don't contact the office at the WAG's email address because they'll just have to forward it to me and we'll lose what may be valuable time. So just a reminder, you will not receive the CE certificate in email. You need to download it yourself in the survey in the 5th question by clicking on the word "here" when it tells you where the certificate is. So if you have trouble with that, please email me. And now that all that's out of the way, it's my great pleasure to introduce our presenter. And before I read her qualifications for presenting this material to you, I do want to also let you know that she has been a wonderful supporter of a rescue dog that our founder, Dr. Marty Becker, has been working with for over a year now. She's been nothing but kind and generous with her behavior help, and we are all of us at Dr. Becker's team and at Fear Free so grateful to her and so admiring of her skill and her compassion. Dr. Sirois received her doctorate of veterinary medicine from Louisiana State University School of Veterinary Medicine. While in school, she was very involved in the American Animal Hospital Association and in leadership of the Integrative Medicine Club. After graduating, she entered an internship program at VCA Veterinary Specialists of Northern Colorado. During that time, she received in-depth training in internal medicine, surgery, neurology, and emergency medicine. Dr. Sirois started her behavior residency in 2017 under the mentorship of Dr. Lisa Radosta, one of only 86 board certified veterinary behaviorists in the US. So was it still 86, Dr. Sirois? I think it is.
Oh, don't put me on the spot. I think so.
I think it might have cracked 90.
I think you're right. I think we might be at 92.
Yeah, I think so, but not many, folks. Very, very few. At home, she is kept on her toes by her Chihuahua Pug mix Molly and her two cats, Choopy or Shoopy and Ducati. How do you say Shoopy or Choopy's name?
It's Choopy.
Choopy. Hello,
in fact,
Choopy.
he's the one in the picture right here.
Oh, okay. Hi, Choopy. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Sirois. Please take it away.
It's my pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you so much for putting this together and to Vetaquinol for sponsoring for us. And as Christy pointed out, I know for some people this is not always the most enjoyable hour to sit down and do some CE, so I really appreciate everybody tuning in. This topic is near and dear to my heart. My mentor, Dr. Radasta, has officially dubbed me the crazy cat lady of our practice, so I'm always excited to discuss cats. This is something that is a really big topic right now, socialization in general in both puppies and kittens. And I don't get to see these little tiny babies in my practice, so I like to be able to pass on the information to you so you can set these guys up for success as much as possible. Additionally, this happens to be the little tiny niche that sent me down the track of becoming a resident in veterinary behavior after watching a kitty kindergarten webinar, much like this one, back in my second year of vet school when I was still working as a technician. So it's one of my very favorite topics, so I appreciate you for joining us tonight. So let's get started. Our roadmap for tonight, we're going to discuss first reviewing the socialization and development of kittens and how we know we can improve that. We're going to talk about options to help facilitate the process when possible. And then the really fun part is going to be going through setting up a kitty kindergarten class and how you can do that in your own practice. Hopefully by the end of this, you will all be convinced that you absolutely need to have one of these in your clinic. So socialization is a buzzword right now. We're seeing lots and lots of socialization webinars and podcasts and lectures. It's super hot right now. I lectured on it all summer long, but this is the first time I get to focus solely on kittens, which is really exciting. But what exactly is socialization? Socialization may also be called the sensitive period. You may have heard it referred that way. This is the few weeks after birth during which a puppy or kitten is most open to new things, new people, new experiences. And there's a big focus in the brain on social learning. So we're talking about interactions with other cats, other people, other conspecifics like dogs and things like that. It's really important during this socialization period that we make these experiences positive and have lots of exposure to different things in a good way to prevent kittens from being fearful later on when they're exposed to these things. One thing that we tend to forget, or some people just haven't learned to start with, we've actually learned that lack of exposure to new things is just as damaging to the emotional development of a puppy or kitten as having a traumatic experience with, say, a guy in a baseball cap. So it's really important that we focus on this and not just avoid trauma. So our job is to make sure that they experience a lot of different things and that all of those interactions are as positive as we can possibly make them. The socialization period is actually a defined developmental period, and you may have heard the 4 to 14 week period get thrown around. That is the period for puppies, but in kittens it's actually different, and it's really important to note the difference because we're actually looking at 2 to 7 weeks of age. When you stop and think about that, that means that by the time most of these kittens go to their new adoptive family, this window is already closed. So in kittens, even more so than in puppies, we have to really focus on what's happening to them before they go to their new home so that then the new parents can build on what's already been started beforehand. There are definitely other factors involved in how fearful a pet is going to be. And we know that genetics and stressors that mom may have experienced when she was pregnant, things like being malnourished, living on the streets, experiencing trauma, etc., definitely affects the brain development of kittens. Overall, genetics is estimated to play about 30 to 50% of a role in the personality development of a kitten. And anybody who's been working in the veterinary industry for any length of time or through rescue or what have you, knows that there is a tendency for us to say, bottle kittens have a certain personality. They tend to be a little feistier. And so this can kind of explain some of that as we look along. Maybe they were, if they were abandoned at such a young age or separated from their mother, there's definitely chronic stress going on there. And the chances of mom having been stressed beforehand is pretty high. That actually develops the brain development, affects the brain development and can affect their ability to learn in the future. In particular, one of the really interesting things about cats is how important the father's personality is. This is a picture from a show that I don't even know if it's on Animal Planet anymore. It was called Too Cute. Every week they would look at a few different litters of kittens or puppies and follow them from birth to the time that they went to their new parents. So this was a picture from that. I happened to watch this show randomly on a Saturday morning one day, and they were following this litter of kittens, which I think may have been Russian blues. And as the kittens were developing, Dad spent most of his time upstairs in a sink. You can see there's a towel in there, like this is his bed. This is where he hangs out all of the time. And eventually the kittens got big enough and were exploring enough that they found his spot. And just the look on his face when they're piling on top of him here, I think is just too priceless not to comment on. So he doesn't seem too thrilled about having these other cats around. Research has shown us that to some degree, the personality of father cats can have a pretty strong influence on how social, how aggressive, and how fearful the kittens will end up being. So this is generally looking at the trait we call friendliness towards humans, which is a big factor in whether a cat stays in a home. Disproportionately among multiple fathers, cats that came from friendly fathers were more likely to be friendly with humans. Cats that came from fathers that were aggressive to humans or fearful of humans were more likely to be aggressive or fearful. So we know that looking at the dad can be really important and give us a lot of information. Unfortunately, with a lot of our kittens, we have no idea who dad is, especially in the height of kitten season. But if somebody's in a breeding program, that would be really important information you would want to have. So I just want to show a little video real quick of some normal kitten behavior. Here's what I would expect to see from kittens that are socially or mentally appropriate. And unfortunately, we don't see this nearly as often as we would like. My apologies, let's go back. So you'll see these kittens have their tails up while they're running around. They come and check in with each other. There's pouncing, everybody's bouncy and they take turns. Oh, let me run over here and go see what they're doing on that side of the room. Oh my gosh, look at all this stuff over here. Let's go check out that kitten, that person. Really no hesitation or trepidation from these little guys that you can see here. Let's then contrast that with what we sometimes see in kittens coming into rescues or into our office that are clearly fearful. Here we can see the dilated pupils, hissing, lip retraction, ears are flattened out to the side, and there's some swatting when somebody gets too close. These are scared kittens. And I acknowledge that being picked up from hanging out with your mom on the side of the street and being scooped up suddenly and dropped in the middle of a vet clinic or a shelter in a cage is really scary. So I'm not saying that you would evaluate this immediately when you see these kittens, but more, a day or two into it, we should be seeing significant changes in this if they are open to being more friendly and getting used to that environment. If they stay this way, this is a red flag that we want to start intervening and approaching them a little bit differently. Now, when we go through appropriate socialization with these kittens, what we know happens is that they learn faster later on in life as well. They have better problem-solving abilities, like this little kitten here playing with his food toy, trying to figure out how the heck am I going to get the food from way down in there. And they have lower emotionality, which means they're not having crazy mood swings. Their emotions aren't all over the map, but they're not as reactive, things like that. When there's a lack of socialization, what we end up seeing is that you can get that defensive aggression similar to the little kittens we saw in the video, starting between 4 and 8 weeks old. So that's really early. By 16 weeks old, these kittens are no longer performing spontaneous play behavior. That all goes away, and they can't socialize with other kittens normally. By 20 weeks old, cats that missed the socialization boat can develop actual antisocial behavior. So we've gone from, I'm just going to stay over here and please don't interact with me, to outright trying to get you to stay away from me. These cats are more difficult to train. They have a less ability to learn, and they're more reactive overall. Now, kittens tend to, we don't get quite as much research done on cats as we do on dogs, just in general. And one of the things we've looked at in dogs, in 1999, one of the behaviorists, Dr. Sexel in Australia, looked at puppies that were already fearful before they went into a socialization class. And what was found was that puppies that were already scared, at 8 weeks old, they remained scared at 6 months of age, whether they'd been to socialization classes, whether they went to training, whether they had both of those experiences. So we know that notable and pronounced fear at a very young age doesn't just get better. So we're not looking at socialization to fix cats with a true emotional problem. We're looking at the normal cats and how we can set them up for the best possible life experience moving forward. Now, a lot of times we get these kittens when that window's already closed, after 7 weeks of age. And a lot of people ask, but, I had a feral kitten that I brought in and I was able to turn it into the friendliest love bug in the world. And there's lots of anecdotes like that. Everybody's an individual. But as a general rule, when you're starting out later in life and this window was missed, we're not actually socializing. At this point, what we're doing is taking the brain pathways that are developed and we're trying to unlearn them and learn something completely new that's in contrast to that. So that, just by nature, takes longer. There's a lot more effort involved, and there's a cap probably on how far that cat can go compared to what its learning would have been and how social it would become if this had been started at 2 to 9 weeks of age. Unfortunately, one of the best examples I have for this is my own cat. This is Ducati. And her name comes from the fact that when she was a little bitty like this, she growled and it sounded like a motorcycle. So that gives you a start of where we were, an idea of where we were starting off in this case. You know that veterinary staff always end up with the lemons. We're drawn to them. So of course, the second that I had an interest in behavior, something was going to fall into my lap. And this was really only a couple of months after I went through that kitty kindergarten webinar. So Ducati showed up at the clinic where I was working as a technician at about 6 weeks old. She had a brother, assumed to be a litter mate, with her, and they were being turned in to be adopted out through our adoption program. When she arrived, she hissed at everything that moved or made a noise, any kind of stimulus whatsoever. She was completely puffed up, all piloerect. Anytime somebody approached the carrier, she swatted at them, and when there wasn't somebody directly trying to approach, she hid completely as tiny as she could in the back of the carrier. Her brother displayed similar signs, though not quite as severe. So we just went ahead and put them in another room, let them hang out, said, we'll let them just kind of decompress overnight, see if they can bounce back. The next day, 24 hours later, I went into their room, and the male kitten had significantly settled down. He was much more interactive and open to handling, so we were able to kind of start examining him and get him enrolled in the adoption program. Ducati had made no improvement whatsoever in that time frame. She was still very, very stressed out and terrified. Being that there wasn't really anybody able at the clinic to sit down and work with this cat on a day-to-day basis, she wasn't going to be long for this world. So I decided, I was all gung-ho. I've done the kitty kindergarten webinar. I can help this cat. I can socialize her. Remember, she was 6 weeks old, presumed, and the window closes at 7. So I was going to take her in and save her and then get her adopted out to a wonderful family within a couple of months. Well, naturally, I did everything wrong. I completely flooded her, meaning that I just overexposed her to everything. I took her to work with me every day. She had a car ride in the carrier every day. When I was writing up medical records, I would take her out and just keep her on my lap, assuming she would get used to it. And knowing what I know now, it's no surprise that this didn't really help her very much. In fact, at home, she never bonded very well with me in the first year or so. She bonded very well to one of my male cats who was a very nurturing figure, but we did not have much of a bond. And for years, she's not ever going to be the cat that I walk up to and just pick up and snuggle. It's never going to happen. But what I ended up doing as I learned more was saying, I'm just going to take a step back, let her be who she is. I'm just going to try to make sure her day-to-day life is as happy as it can be. So now we're at 6 years later. And of course, she never got adopted out. She stayed with me, which I'm happy about. But as I said, she's made some improvements. She knows I'm not going to run up to her and grab her at any point in the day. But if I get within 5 feet of her at the wrong point, or I'm moving too intentionally towards her, she's going to run. And she's easily startled. She's still got some other behavior issues, like she's one of the kittens that likes to suckle on fabric. But in her general day-to-day life, if I don't have to take her to the vet or put her heartworm preventative on, she's a pretty happy cat. Over time, just by ignoring her and giving her space, she did start to solicit more attention and had a much faster recovery when I do have to do things that she dislikes. And then in the last couple of months, there was a significant kind of notable change in her, in being much more affectionate, less easily startled. I mean, she's still not going to let me pick her up, don't get me wrong. But I just noticed something seems to be different. Now, we've been in the same house for 2 years now, which is longer than we've been anywhere for a while. And so there are other things that she may be habituated to and is more comfortable about. But the other thing that I changed is I added in a supplement to her food. It's a supplement called Zilkine that in theory boosts her confidence, and research has shown that it can increase affiliative behavior. So I've continued to do that because it seems to make a difference for her. And what happened recently is I had a colleague come down to stay with me. This is a colleague that's been here before several times, so that's potentially a factor as well. But we have this little clip of a video you'll see of Ducati suddenly interacting with her. So it's not a great quality video, but you can see that she is headbutting and wanting her to pet her repeatedly. So that was a big significant difference in her. But the point I wanted to make is, even with that significant improvement, she's not a cat that runs up to people and wants to interact with them most of the time. And if I or my friend had stood up in that instance during that video, she would have gone running. So, that's an instance of when we've missed our window, how things take a lot longer and our end goal is a little bit different. So let's compare that a little bit with some cats that have gone through kitty kindergarten. These are 2 cats owned by one of my colleagues up in New York, Andrea too, and her cats are just absolutely adorable. These are side-by-side pictures of their first days of kitty kindergarten. You can see that Kahlua on the left went through kindergarten in January of 2018, whereas Callie on the right just went through kitty kindergarten last month. Now, their mom told me that there's notable differences in their personalities from the very beginning. Kahlua has always been a very outgoing cat. She's been very social with other people, other cats. Some of the other things that you noticed about her is that she had a really good attention span. She was super focused and food motivated, which helped aid her ability to be trained. But as a note to the fact that just one experience can really affect things in the long run, there was an incident where a dog barked and lunged at Kahlua's mom while Kahlua was with her. And after that, she always trembled when she saw dogs. So even a cat that's very social in one situation can be scared by other things. On the other side, we've got Callie, who is much more independent from people as a young kitten. And one of the things that sometimes makes it a little tougher, she's not very food motivated. When she was at kitty kindergarten, she wouldn't eat baby food, which, as a lot of people know, baby food is like cat crack. It's like the last thing we pull out to offer when they won't eat anything else. There was a particularly rambunctious little cat in the class with her, and when he got really intense and up in her face, she hissed and ran away at the first class. Eventually, Mom figured out that chasing items and hunting behavior is actually a very rewarding thing for her. So in this case, Mom was able to start rewarding her with chasing kibble down across the room or a little hunt-type toy, and that was really helpful to be able to teach her and reward her for some of the things that we'd be working on. And that was able to help adjust her interactions with that cat that had scared her out before. Since the class, Mom reports that she's been much more affectionate, she's snuggly, and she kisses people all the time, which is a nice little side effect because we all get cats that we want to snuggle with, that's for sure. Now, as I mentioned, Kahlua is really food motivated. She likes to perform tricks. We'll see some photos of Callie's recent kitty kindergarten later on in the presentation, but I wanted to give you an update on Kahlua now that she's officially 2 years old. She turned 2 years old, I think it was 2 days ago. She's remained very, very social with people and other cats. Mom fosters kittens a lot, and she has had good relationships with all of them and good interactions. When a stranger comes to the house, she runs toward the door, which is the complete opposite of what we expect most cats to do. And in addition, she's very special because she booked a modeling job up in New York, which required her to go for a 90-minute train ride after a long day at work with Mom. And after that experience, she just hung out in a dressing room for a little while. And after coming out and exploring on her own, she was then moved to another room where she was on a table under lights with a bunch of weird people and cameras, and with all that going on, she was still able to perform some of the trained behaviors that were requested of her. So that tells us her adaptability is really good and her sociability has been maintained, which is really great. You can see her adorable little trained behavior here. This is her meerkat, where Mom says, "Meerkat," and she sits up on her hind legs, and she always puts her paw up by her right ear. That's an important part of her little behavior there. So we can see some of the benefits of the socialization class for her, as well as the handling for vet visits and things like that. Mom said was really helpful for her. So what are some things we can do to set these kittens up for success when we do have them at that super duper young age? Well, we know that handling is a really important part of it. We've got multiple studies that have been done over the years that have told us, first was telling us 15 minutes of handling a day was the ideal amount, but that's been updated to now we're looking at 40 minutes of gentle, positive handling a day to help increase the sociability and friendliness of kittens with people once they hit 14 weeks old. We also know that being handled by 5 or more people has been shown to help reduce the number of escape attempts cats make when they meet strangers. So if they're handled by 5 or more people, they're more likely to be okay being handled by strangers, which is great. And that 3 to 14 weeks age period is when this handling has to occur in order for it to work. Otherwise, we end up with cats that we can't affect really their response to handling nearly as well, because the reaction to handling is very well established by 4 months of age. So kittens that aren't handled at all before 14 weeks, you can do a whole lot of handling after that, but just the handling itself is not going to improve their reaction to strangers at that point. And as veterinary people, handling affects pretty much every interaction that we have with cats. So it's really important. Now, I know not everybody can have a full kitty kindergarten in their clinic, but we know that just talking to clients during those kitten visits spread out over a few months can really make a big difference still. We know that 25 minutes to less than an hour spread out over that time frame can have significant positive effects on the behavior of cats in the long run. So looking at cats that are given a set of structured behavior kind of recommendations during their kitten visits compared to those that aren't, those kittens have been reported at a year of age to be doing less vocalizing, less climbing on things, less harassing owners when they're lying down, all of those things that really annoy people and we hear about a lot. So we can do this, and it doesn't mean you have to sit there and talk for 25 minutes. This can be referring them to the appropriate resources for them to review in their own time. And of course, we have other products that can potentially aid the socialization process, such as supplements like the Zilkine I mentioned earlier, Angstitane and Soliquin are other products we use in cats. We have pheromones that can facilitate the process, and now there's 2 different forms of feel-away with different goals. Feel-away multi-cat tends to be really great for making them feel warm and fuzzy and willing to interact with each other a little bit more, so that can be really beneficial in a kitty kindergarten situation or introducing new cats. And then there's dietary options. There are things like Calm Diet or CD Stress that do have some components that could reduce stress and therefore facilitate learning. So the actual socialization classes, we want to know, what does it actually do for cats if we set these programs up? So a study looking at 37 kittens in rescue split up into 2 groups back in 2008 looked at kittens that just had a normal interaction with people in the shelter. So mostly feeding and cleaning the cage were the way that they interacted with people, versus kittens that were in an enhanced program, which had more handling. They interacted with at least 4 different people. There was at least 1 man and 1 child less than 10 years old, because a lot of kittens don't come and have experiences with those things. And then a friendly dog and exposure to normal household sounds. This was all done in the 2 to 9 week period that we were talking about. The results showed that the cats that went through the more structured, expanded socialization program had greater emotional support that they provided to their parent. And this is obviously owner reported a year later. But in my mind, that translates to a greater human-animal bond between pet parent and cat. And we know that that is going to be better for keeping cats in homes. The better the human-animal bond, the more likely they are to stay in their home. The cats that went through the expanded socialization program also showed fewer signs of fear of people. In fact, at a year of age, greater than 75% of cats that did show fear of humans were in that group that had no extra socialization. So we know that it makes a big difference. Now, one of the big concerns about putting a bunch of kittens in a room together and just letting them go to town is the spread of diseases, which is a very legitimate concern. I am still first and foremost a veterinarian, and I obviously want to keep everybody safe and healthy as much as you do. There hasn't been good research done on this in kittens yet. As I mentioned, they tend to come later, if at all. But studies in puppies have shown that even across lots and lots of different facilities, different dog trainer facilities and vet clinics that had puppy socialization classes, including puppies only less than 16 weeks old that had at least been vaccinated once. In those puppies, there were no reported cases or even suspected cases of canine parvovirus, which is one of the biggest concerns in puppies. And the people who have been doing kitten kindergarten for a long time report that by being smart about how they run these classes, they haven't run into any issues of spread of disease either. So how do we set that up? Well, let's talk about that. The rules for kitty kindergarten enrollment are, we're looking at kittens 8 to 12 weeks old, and it runs for about 3 weeks. So we don't want kittens to be older than 14 weeks by the end of the class, because by then they're just in a different stage of development and it changes what we're doing. The first vaccines have all been done, of course, and deworming, and the kittens continue with that process during the class. And at each session, there's a health check done by the person running the class to make sure there's no obvious signs of illness. If there are, the kitten will leave. And we prevent mingling of litter boxes and things like that. If a kitten goes to the bathroom, it gets cleaned up immediately. The litter box gets switched out, etc. So with those basic recommendations, we can keep illness at bay. So the goals for our kitty kindergarten are, number one, to set client expectations. Expectations for cat ownership have changed drastically. Cats have long been kind of assumed to be a set it and forget it type of pet. Like, I brought it into this house, I gave it a litter box, some water, and some food. Why is there an issue? Now we know that cats need a lot more. So we need people to understand what their life is going to look like now. They need to understand the needs of their cat and how they can meet them. They want to learn normal behaviors. A lot of the problem behaviors reported in cats very commonly are normal behaviors, whether that's scratching something or play bite behavior, things like that. So we need them to understand what's normal. And then we're going to create positive associations with handling and procedures that kittens will have to go through, both at home and at the vet clinic. Classes are broken up into 1-hour sessions a week apart for 3 weeks. So this isn't a super long program. Typically, there will be 2 instructors if there's more than a couple of cats, and you don't want more than 6 kittens. Then it just becomes overwhelming for everybody. The first week, which may surprise you, it's actually kitten-free. This is for a very obvious reason. If there are kittens there, everybody just focuses on the kittens and nobody listens to anything that the instructor is saying. So this has worked out well, having a kitten-free session first. They're able to go over basic husbandry, litter box tips, recommended toys, things like that. The basic tenets of training, like we want to focus on rewarding the behaviors that we want rather than trying to punish cats. So very common for people to reach for the spray water bottle or yell at a cat, and we know that that doesn't work out very well. So we want to avoid those types of interactions. And then we want to go over the basics of enrichment, adding in how to set up the house, how to spread out meals and feed out of puzzle toys and all of that great stuff to keep them happy and mentally healthy. Now, there's a lot of variation in how you can set up a kitty kindergarten class. This is an image from the San Francisco SPCA's class, and I just really thought it was such a great setup for this situation where you can see that when everybody first comes in, they're all separated. They have alone time first. There's visual barriers in the form of blankets between the enclosures. And that way, we have total control over if and when the kittens are allowed to see each other and interact. Now, week 2, this is the first class the kittens are involved. So kittens are going to arrive in their carriers and won't be let out until the instructor tells people to do that. Handling is going to be a big focus of this session. And then there's a lot of people also teach cats how to settle or relax. And sometimes they do this through a more structured protocol, but a lot of times it's just kind of relaxing massage to help them kind of settle into the environment. We then start some basic training and tips on how to do that, including skills that will help build manners just in living day-to-day life with a cat, and then also when it's appropriate, if the cats want to interact, they'll have playtime at the end of the session. So I have some very short video clips of some of the skills we'd work on week 2, and then when we get to week 3, I have the same type of setup. You can see here this very handsome Bengal kitten is having his paw handled, and I think Dad has the treat in the other hand, but we're just working on getting used to those simple handling exercises. So this is just a little video showing some of the handling that will be done. Here it's just kittens getting used to being held up by a person, teaching the owners how to hold a cat properly. And then there's a game you'll see called Pass the Kitten, where it's just passing the kitten from mom to the next guy in the class and this other random person so that they can get used to, interactions with those people don't have to be scary. Sorry, we'll go back here and look at that. So you'll see this orange guy really isn't fazed about being held. And then passing the kittens. One of the simplest things to teach a cat is sit. And yes, I have trained my cats to sit, and they have to sit and be quiet before eating, just like my dog does. Dr. Yin here has the best little video for teaching sit to a cat, so I'm just going to show you that. This is from the actual kitty class that I first watched and really enjoyed. So you'll see it's just a simple offering food. Offering food, waiting for the sit, giving the food once the cat sits to reward that behavior. And you can see this kitten picks it up pretty quickly. No surprise there. One of, I think, the most important skills for cats to learn is a cue to get into their carrier. How many times have we had appointments rescheduled, moved, or just completely never happened because the moment the cat sees the carrier, they run for the hills and nobody can find them? This is a little video from one of my technician friends of her cat, Darla, who's just adorable. Mom's actually holding the carrier up in the air, and you'll see that she'll jump up into it because she loves her carrier so much, which is just what we would all love from our cat, I'm sure. Just a quick little upsy daisy. And that's what we really want to see, the cat that runs to its carrier instead of running away. And then usually the session ends, if the kitten wants, with some playtime. So you can just see some normal practice fight behavior there, some general playing and interacting with each other. So hopefully this will encourage these kittens to be comfortable interacting with a new cat later on in life if somebody decides to add one to the house. If the kitten doesn't want to play, we don't force the issue. I can't make them want to play with other cats, but I can give them the opportunity if they would like. Moving on to week 3, we will do this real quickly. We're looking at some vet care skills and the harness, training to the harness, which is kind of an optional thing. But what I think is really important for us is some of these behaviors that we see owners come into the clinic for, right? So nail trims here, just pairing that with food over and over can make this a positive experience. And then the client doesn't have to come into us for a nail trim because they can't touch their cat. Teaching them to be comfortable with an injection, as shown here, is another great situation. So we've got some food. In this case, it's really just distraction, but by pairing food with a simulated injection repeatedly, we can make cats be less concerned about an injection. And how wonderful would that be at 10 years old the cat gets diagnosed with diabetes, and it's not a fight every day. This is just a little video of luring the kitten through the harness with some food so that they get comfortable wearing that, and then walking around a little bit, making that fun, because that can be great enrichment, is taking your cat for walks, even though you will then become the neighborhood cat person. But I think that's a badge of honor. So then finally in week 3, you can discuss problem behaviors, such as the appropriate ways to play. So many people think it's adorable to play with kittens using their hands, and all that does is teach these kittens to grab onto hands, and they'll continue to do that when they're older, so that becomes a problem. Scratching is obviously a big issue, and we're seeing the trend of declawing becoming illegal. So regardless of how you feel about that, we still need to know how to teach these cats to scratch appropriately so that we can avoid that procedure in case we need to in the future. And then I just want to focus on the benefits to the clinic and the staff by doing this type of program. One, it's going to bond the client to your practice and make them see you as the go-to person for all things cat related instead of Dr. Google. Wouldn't that be nice? Having less stressful vet visits is really fantastic. The cat on the right is a cat owned by a colleague of mine who's 20 years old, and she looks fantastic, but she is well known for being just World War III anytime she needs to be handled. And I got this photo recently, just using some different approaches and technique. Everybody's much happier and smiling. Great if we can make that procedure start from when they're kittens instead of trying to undo a scary experience. And I know at the end of the day, when I get to have these kind of experiences with my patients, I'm much more satisfied at the end of the day than if I feel I have to be scaring them and fighting with them constantly. So this can really help improve potentially our mental health and our job satisfaction. And come on, who doesn't want to play with kittens at the end of the day? I think having kitty kindergarten would be the highlight of most of our days. Real quick, I'm just going to show you a few resources you can go to or you can send your clients to for more information. Dr. Sophia Yin has a full DVD outlining her program for kitty kindergarten, and that's a great option to go through with your clients. The Trainable Cat is a book I'm recommending to all of my clients these days. It's got great information on how to train a cat, how to make that part of your daily life and enrichment with your cat, and how you can use it to address some problem behaviors. Our website, Florida Veterinary Behavior Service, is constantly updated with articles for veterinarians and clients for both dogs, cats, even birds. And it's a great place to just send people as a starting point, like, hey, go check this out. They've got some great resources for you to review. And then we've got some other great resources in Fear Free, obviously. You guys are taking advantage of some of the perks associated with that, so that's a great place. And they have, of course, their website for pet owners, which is fearfreehappyhomes.com. And Vetiquinol, our sponsor for today, also has a website providing some great behavior information for puppies and kittens called myhappypets.com. So those are some good resources you can check out. And at this point, I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in, and I'm happy to go through any questions that you have.
So thank you so much, Dr. Sirois, for essentially letting us watch kitten videos all evening. It was fantastic. I was really enjoying it. I'm like sitting there going, wow, this is really fun. So thank you for that. We do have a number of questions, and some of them are about Zilkeen. And I swear we didn't plant these for the sponsor.
No, we didn't.
We didn't. We got them. So what is the youngest age that you can give Zilkeen to a kitten?
I would feel comfortable starting it in an 8-week-old kitten.
Okay. And was Zilkeen what you put into Ducati's food, or was it something?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. It was Zilkeen, and it was a standard dose. Sometimes I have a lot of patients that need a lot more help. And so I use higher doses sometimes in my practice, but she just got the standard 75 milligram capsule in her food once a day. And I was really lucky because they've designed it to be very palatable. I know some cats will lick it straight off a plate, but obviously she's not a cat I can just walk up to and pill if I need to. So I was very fortunate that it's palatable, and I just mix it in with her wet food, and it's never been an issue, which is really great.
Okay, great. And then the final Zilkene question is, what is in Zilkene?
Zilkene has an active ingredient called alpha-casozepine, which is a big fancy word for a hydrolyzed milk protein. And it's been shown, there's lots of studies, some great research out there. I'd be happy to kind of pass along to anybody, showing it the calming effect that it has on animals. There's products for horses and dogs and cats as well. It works on the same type of receptors as like a Valium does. And so the effect we generally see is less fear, increased confidence, which is exactly what I'm looking for from Ducati. So it can be really helpful for those scaredy cats out there. We generally don't use it in cats or dogs that are aggressive because we don't want to boost confidence in that issue. We'll, use that for something. We'll use a different supplement in that instance, but that's generally the effect that I'm looking for when I start my patients on Zilkene.
Great. Is the kitten socialization period 2 to 7 weeks or 6 to 12 weeks?
2 to 7 weeks.
And at what age is it appropriate for introducing multiple handlers?
As young as they're in your hands. If you've got bottle-fed babies, start them at 5 days old.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Just, of course, you're going to use appropriate hygiene. Don't have people handle one kitten and then go handle another kitten without washing their hands, things like that. But
so the next question, it was asked in 2 parts, and I hope that I'm piecing them together correctly. This was, what tips do you have for foster volunteers in a program who aren't generally comfortable handling and socializing hissy, spitting, swatting kittens?
Yeah, so I couldn't really go into that for time reasons today. We're focusing on normal kittens.
Okay.
Cats that are abnormal, as we kind of went over today, they need a different approach, and generally that may include, going to your veterinarian for a medical workup, of course, making sure that there's nothing abnormal there, and then starting something, whether it's a supplement or a medication, so that at a very, very young age, don't be afraid to start young, so that you can actually decrease that fear threshold. Otherwise, how are you going to make progress? When you're that scared, you can't learn, you can't have positive experience that we reinforce. So that's when I say reach for a veterinarian, veterinary behaviorist, something like that to help those kittens along.
Okay. There's a follow-up question about the socialization period. If the socialization period is finished at 7 weeks, how is it helpful to do kitten kindergarten after that? And why the 14-week limit then? They're confused about the 2 time frames given.
It's a very good question. And my response is that this is what the science tells us. We know that the socialization period kind of closes at that 7-week point, but having handling starting anywhere between 2 weeks and kind of 14 weeks has been shown to help cats have better sociability and interactions with people. So even though we may be starting it at 8 weeks, 9 weeks, the science is telling us it still helps. So we know, socialization or any developmental period, it's not like a door slams shut right at 7 weeks. There's always individual variability, and you're not going to go from being, I want to go interact with a person this day, to not doing it the next day. There's going to be a gradient. So we know that doing this before 14 weeks does help them have better interactions with people. But what's interesting is in the study that I mentioned looking at, kittens that were handled in that shelter, even though they were exposed to a friendly dog at that really young age, they were 2 to 9 weeks old, and normal household noises, even though we saw improvement in friendliness towards people, or at least less fear of strangers, there was no significant difference between the two groups, between responses to noises and fear of noises or interactions with dogs and things like that. So really at that point, we're focusing on that interaction with people, because really that's what's going to keep cats in homes, is have them being comfortable being around lots of different people.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. I think also that there's different types of socialization that you discussed, and that might also be part of it, that maybe a kitten who's not used to being around people prior to 7 weeks, the door shuts, but they're still learning with new experiences. That was what I sort of.
You're always still learning.
Yeah.
You can't exist in the world without learning something.
Well, I don't know. The internet proves that you're wrong about that. So.
I guess that's a good point.
Okay. We have a lot more questions, so we're going to get to as many of them as we can. And I'm going to start with the ones that are specifically about kitty kindergarten, and we may or may not get to some others. One person said that you may have said this, but if so, they missed it. Kindergarten is 3 weeks with 1 hour sessions. Is that every day? How long?
It's 1 week apart. So 3 sessions over 3 weeks, 1 week apart.
So a total of 3 hours over a 3 week period. Okay, great, thank you. And then what do you have any, we got more, this asked more than once. Do you have any recommendations about how to charge for it, the fee for the kitty kindergarten?
I do not, except for, I would say, charge for it.
Yes.
This is your time, and generally anything in behavior medicine, there's a lot of kind of discussion about how should we charge for it, because people are generally sitting down and mostly talking to us. But what we need to look at is what would you normally charge a client for that time frame spent with them? So for an hour, if you spent an hour with them. And a lot of times we end up charging based on that type of thing. We also have to look though, I'd actually have to ask Dr. Tu, and she might be with us tonight. I don't know if she was able to join us, kind of what the charge is for the one that she goes to. But we're also looking at a long-term investment. One of the big things we've been talking about since that bear study came out in 2007 is how do we get cats into the clinic? They're not coming in to see us. We need to increase cat visits. We need to get them to come back over and over again. And so we're looking at not only making visits less scary and easier for the owner, but also bonding them to your practice specifically. So by doing these classes, we're looking at keeping these cats coming back, not only through the time that they're in their home, but really we're looking at keeping them in the home, and then they're seeing you once or twice a year that entire time. And so the long-term payoff of that, ideally. So I would say charge for it. You can have technicians run these classes. It doesn't have to be a doctor involved, but it shouldn't be a freebie, because people need to pay for your time.
Great, thank you. We had a couple follow-up questions on Zilke, and I swear they're real questions. Do you use it to treat forever or just short term?
It completely depends on the situation.
Okay.
Now, it can safely be used forever. And at this point, I'm probably going to keep it on, keep Ducati on it, because she likes it and I like it, and why wouldn't I? But I know sometimes with any kind of pharmaceutical or non-pharmacological, like a supplement, sometimes I'm just looking to get through a particular time period to help them through a transition, like moving or 4th of July or having visitors over or something like that, or being able to start doing behavior modification. Like when I have 2 cats fighting in a house, maybe I'll start Zilkeen in the really kind of timid one, and that will help them be able to learn and be calm enough to progress through those therapies, and then maybe we don't need it once we've gotten through that process. I know some people also use it just very short term for, like I said, like 4th of July, for a couple days before and a couple days after, and that seems to work well for them. I really can't speak to that because the subset of patients that I see generally need much more help than that, and so I haven't had the opportunity to use it that way and give you feedback on it.
I have friends who give it to their cats for a few days before of that visit also, in the same way as you're describing, and have luck with it. So
Excellent.
I think people do use it like that. Although most of the cats, I think, would be very happy to get it every day. They do seem to like it. So one last Zilkeen question. Do you increase the dose by increased frequency or amount, and how long to see effects?
I increase the total dose that I give at once. So the standard dosing, when you break it down, ends up being about 15 mg per kg once a day. I will generally give 30 mg per kg once a day. There's no reason a client couldn't give half in the morning and half at night, but a lot of times the way the capsules are dosed, it's easier to do it all at once, and I haven't run into tummy upset or any reasons that I couldn't continue doing it that way.
Great. Okay. Sorry, we got so many more questions just in the last couple seconds. I think we're going to have to skip these very last ones. I'll just take this as the final question. Would you suggest allowing children in the kitty kindergarten classes?
So it looks like the classes that I've been involved in didn't have kids so much, but the initial program written by Dr. Yin in her DVD actually has a lot of pictures of kids interacting with the cats and handling them. And I would say appropriate children would be great. So similar to, like they said, exposure to a child under the age of 10, or to a friendly dog, would be beneficial. Well, I'd be looking for kids that are kind of calmer and quieter and know how to appropriately handle a cat and won't just run around and grab them, because I really don't think it's fair to ask any cat to put up with that. So we need to be smart about it, but I think that could be potentially very beneficial, because how many people get kittens for their kids? And that's actually how I had my first cat. I was harassing the heck out of my grandparents' cat. I ended up getting a cat to leave her alone. So I think that would potentially be very helpful. I'll give you a little preview. Some data I've been collecting recently does seem to show that kids under the age of 12 can be related to maybe some fear in the house. So we would want them to feel comfortable in those situations, certainly, if we can help with that.
That's great. Thank you. That is all we have time for. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Sirois, and thanks again to all of you for being here, and to Kitten for making this presentation possible. Remember, if you have questions or problems with getting your CE, if you have not received the email within an hour of the presentation ending, please email me at fearfreepets@gmail.com. Thank you all so much, and good night.